Hello and welcome. This is a 5-part series dealing with the issue of errors of the Roman Catholic Church. I am Aaron Milavec, a retired professor of theology. I've been teaching for 25 years in Catholic settings and another 10 years in Protestant settings, so I've got a mixed bag. I am not an enemy of the Catholic Church, far from it. I was born a Catholic. I've lived my entire life as a Catholic. I taught in seminaries for 25 years as a Catholic, and I'm going to die as a Catholic. However, because I am an insider, I know some very important things that I want to share with you. This is part 3 of a 5-part series on the errors of the Roman Catholic Church. Our topic for today is the immortal soul. Okay, let's begin by allowing you to understand the experience of death from the Jewish point of view. I speak of the Jewish point of view because not only the Hebrew scriptures, but the Christian scriptures were written by Jews. Okay, going forward then. My dad had fallen to the floor of his home. The paperboy happened to notice that he wasn't reading the newspaper. My dad loved the newspaper. And he looked into the blinds, and what he saw was my dad was prone on the ground. The police were called. They broke into the house. They realized he had had a stroke. He was taken to the hospital. Over a period of 2 weeks, there was some possibility that he might continue to live a normal life. But then the nurse informed me that it appears that your dad is failing rapidly. He will be dead in the next 3 days. So I decided to actually join my dad in his journey towards death. At about 11 o'clock at night, I was alone in the hospital room. The monitors were actually beeping very quietly. And what I noticed was my dad's deep breathing. I could see his chest rising and falling very peacefully. Then I noticed that he stopped breathing. But it didn't last long. About 5 seconds later, he began breathing again. After a couple of hours, however, this changed. I noticed that my dad was now not breathing more quickly than before. Now the time between his stopping of breathing, they had gone from, I would say, a half hour to 10 minutes. Each time, however, after he had a period of not breathing, he would just quietly begin breathing again. But then about 3 o'clock in the morning, there was a new situation. Now my dad stopped breathing, and he never continued breathing. After 5 minutes, I knew that my father had died. Well, I am not someone who has been immune from death and dying. I had a cat, for instance, a Siamese cat, and his health was deteriorating. And one particular morning, I saw that he was very weak. He was not eating. He was something like my dad. And so I took him onto my lap, and I stroked him very, very gently and softly. After about an hour, I noticed that his breathing had stopped. Is there any significant difference between my dad dying and my cat dying? If I were just to look at the experience of it, I would say no. When breathing stops, death takes in. Death takes over. This was the sort of thing that the Jews believed. And if I had actually grown up in a Jewish society in the first century, I would have never have thought that there is any other way of looking at it. But, as things happened, I grew up in the 20th century, and I was exposed to many, many other divergent ideas. Okay, let's go back to my experience with the Ursuline sisters at Holy Cross grade school. They gave us the catechism, remember? The Baltimore Catechism. And when I looked at the Baltimore Catechism, I find some very, very interesting material. Let me see if I can actually pick it up here. Yes. Question number 3. What is man? Answer: man is a creature composed of body and soul, and made to the image and likeness of God. Isn't that interesting? Body and soul, composed of body and soul. Two different things come together. Question number 4. Is the likeness in the body or in the soul? Well, the likeness is chiefly in the soul. How is the soul like to God? The soul is like God because it is a spirit that will never die, and it has understanding and free will. A spirit that will never die. The soul will never die. What the Catechism was asking me to believe is that the stuff of life, the breathing, is not all there is. That behind the scenes is an immortal soul. An immortal soul that keeps track of all of my thoughts, all of my hopes, all of my dreams, all of my history, such that when death takes place, guess what? The body dies, but the soul takes flight and goes up into the heavens, hopefully to take residence there. But there is to be a judgment, a preliminary judgment, and if the judgment is favorable, then I will go to heaven and spend the rest of my days in heaven. If they are not favorable, then I will go to hell or to purgatory. That's a very bad ending. What's God saying? I am the one who lives forever. You, my children, will not live forever. This is the best way. Trust me. This is the best way. Trust me. But actually, most Catholics today do not trust God. Do not trust God. They want some assurance that they have immortality. And how do they get that assurance of immortality? The immortal soul. Now, let's take a look at this from the viewpoint of my own experience, bringing this question to bear upon my own life. I told you earlier the story of Mr. Martin and how he created a real big theological issue for me. And wonder of wonder, miracle of miracles, he gave me a taste for doing theology, of studying theology, of learning what it really means to be, what can you say, guided by the Bible. What does God say about our future after our death? Well, he says some important things. Okay, Genesis 3:19. In the sweat of your face you will eat bread until you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. Matter of fact, these are exactly the words that at the beginning of Lent, the priest says, when he traces on our forehead in dust, ashes actually, unto dust you were made, unto dust you will return. There is no afterlife. Another citation, Ecclesiastes 9:5. For the living know that they will die, but the dead, they don't know anything at all, nor do they have any more reward, because all memory of them is forgotten. And their love and their hate, their jealousy have already perished, and they have no longer any share of what is being done under the sun. Ha! The dead are out of the picture. They have no influence anymore. That's what Ecclesiastes is saying. Another citation. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For there is no work, nor planning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave. In the grave where you are going. Another citation. For there is an outcome for humans and there's an outcome for animals. They all have the same outcome. As the one dies, so the other dies. And they all have but one spirit. And the word here in Greek is pneuma, spirit, breath. They all have one breath. So man has no superiority over the animals. Whoopsie, whoopsie, whoopsie. No superiority over the animals. They have the same end, the same beginning. The same end and the same beginning. So, this is very, very different from what I was learning from the Baltimore Catechism. According to the Baltimore Catechism, I had an immortal soul because I'm a human. But my dogs here, they don't have an immortal soul. They just have animal souls. That isn't going to go very far for them because when they die completely. But I only appear to die. My soul continues to live, and it will continue to live forever and ever and ever, in different places at different times, but forever. This is what we need to look at. Okay. When did I have my little first crisis with regards to the soul? Well, it came in 1968. I had just enrolled in the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. Oh, it was a wonderful place to be. And in one of my courses, we were considering immortality, the quest for immortality. And in 1955, a Protestant theologian, Oscar Cullmann, wrote a book and delivered a lecture on the topic of immortality. It was the Ingersoll lecture. And what he did shook up me and actually my generation of learners. He said that there is a vast difference between Socrates dying and Jesus dying. Socrates lived much earlier than Jesus. As a matter of fact, Socrates died in the year 399, February 15th, at the age of 70. So he was approximately twice the age of Jesus, and actually much earlier. And in the Socratic dialogues, Socrates is portrayed as a troublemaker when it came to his relationship with the youth of Athens. He was a Greek. As a matter of fact, a lot of parents thought that actually he was downright, he was a menace to society. Most of the religious beliefs that Greeks held, he refused to hold. He did not believe, for instance, that Zeus, for one moment, could be really the best god that one could have. I mean, here was a guy who actually raped a lot of women, had his own favorites in war, and his own enemies in war. And he was not an example of a god by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, well, people didn't like hearing these things. And so finally, they brought him to the law courts, that he was a corrupter of the youth of Athens. He tried to defend himself, but was unable to. And he was given the death penalty. The penalty would be that actually he would drink the hemlock which causes a freezing of the breathing apparatus. And once again, we're getting back to breath. The breathing apparatus, and one dies out of breath. Out of breath. That's the way he died. But Socrates had another mission. He wanted to show his disciples that they don't have to fear death. Why not? Because they have a soul that is stronger and more lasting than the decisions of a law court. Socrates was able to persuade his students during the final hours before his death that actually he had nothing to fear. In fact, he had everything to gain because he was going to die. What did he have to gain? Well, Socrates thought that actually living in a body is a very precarious sort of situation. You've got one feeling now, one feeling later. Now you're positive, now you're negative, now you're hopeful, now you're despairing. This was not a good environment for learning truth. As a matter of fact, Socrates said bluntly to his students, it is better to be dead than to be alive. Because when you're dead, you don't have to deal with these nasty emotions, and you can deal entirely with the quest for truth. And guess what? Socrates believed that actually when he died, his own mission as a truth seeker was going to continue. He was going to meet with other, what can you call them, prophets, philosophers, and they were going to continue to solve the problems of the world. And, of course, one of the big problems is, what is truth? What is truth? What is the truth about man's true character? Well, Socrates thought and taught that we are composed of a body and soul. And so what I was reading to you just a moment ago, question 3 of the Baltimore Catechism, this is not the answer of Jesus, far from it. This is the answer of Socrates. And so what had happened? What had happened? How did Socrates get into the Baltimore Catechism? Cullmann tells us. He showed that the early church began to actually recruit from the Greek-speaking intellectuals of the day. All of these Greek-speaking intellectuals believed in the soul, the immortal soul. And so when they entered the church and understood the mission of Jesus, they retained much of their thinking about the soul power that was behind it. And so they were the ones responsible for beginning to blend the ideas of Jesus and the ideas of the soul. Did Jesus think he had a soul? No, he did not. And what does Cullmann say about this? Jesus was petrified of dying. Yes. If you read the Gospels carefully, he went into the garden He prayed to God, is there some other way whereby he could get beyond this present moment without losing his life? That was his prayer. He was sweating blood, the Gospels say. He was petrified of what was going to take place to him, with him. Totally different situation. Jesus never says, ha, guess what, guys? I have an immortal soul. You've got immortal souls. We're never going to die. Never, never, never. Even after the resurrection of Jesus, at the end of the Gospels, when one reads the story of Jesus meeting with his disciples, not a single one of them says, oh, tell us about the afterlife. What was your experience in Hades, actually? What was your experience in Hades? You died, you went to where everyone else went, into Hades, sometimes called hell, but not the hellfire that we're familiar with, but the Hades of the Greeks. Okay, well, Jesus had nothing to say about that, nor did any of his disciples think that he ought to have something to say about this. When you die, you return to the dust out of which you were formed. Life is breathing. Once again, the Jewish view over and against the Greek Socratic view. So, Oscar Cullmann published his book. It was called The Immortality of the Soul, or The Resurrection of the Dead. Question mark. Which one was it? Was it Socrates or was it Jesus? Okay. Cullmann got a lot of responses on this. As a matter of fact, he challenged the theologians of his day to find a single instance where Jesus begins to promote the Socratic theology, where Jesus says, oh, you have a soul that is much more important than your body. You have a soul that is immortal. Your body is temporary. You have a soul that inquires after truth and actually does it much better after death. None of these things are found in any of the Gospels. Why? Because the Gospels were written by Jews in a Jewish milieu. They were Greek-speaking, sure enough, but they did not buy into the Socratic point of view. But, as Cullmann explained, the church became very Socratic in already the end of the 2nd century. The 3rd century, they got more and more involved in the Socratic Middle Platonism. Now, I used to believe that actually the only books safe for me to read were the ones that had an imprimatur given by a Catholic author, a Catholic scholar, a Catholic expert. But Oscar Cullmann, was not a Catholic. He was a Protestant. And I was amazed that a Protestant could discover this and to tell his story, if you want, so forthrightly. As a matter of fact, Cullmann said this particular book of his caused more stir than all of his other books put together. People were not happy that Cullmann was challenging the views of Socrates that had found their way within Christianity. They were not happy at all. They thought that Jesus espoused these views as his own personal point of view. Did anyone really go on to investigate this? It seems not. Did the Catholic Church, who must have been actually aware of this writing of Oscar Cullmann in 1955, did they actually create a team of experts in order to look into the question? No way. They thought they had it right. Protestants had nothing to teach them. Protestants had nothing to teach them. But I saw that this was actually a highly prejudicial and biased point of view. Oscar Cullmann had discovered something that all the best Jesuit theologians in the Vatican didn't know about. Were they going to do something about it? Let's wait and see. Going ahead now, Let's go to 1999, before the great millennium change of 2000. Here's a Jesuit, Stanley B. Morrow. He wrote an article that actually explores the question of the immortal soul, the same thing that Oscar Cullmann did in 1955, but this is now 45 years later. And now he says that the Socratic point of view was not the point of view of the Gospels or of the New Testament in its entirety. When you look at the Hebrew Scriptures, all of the early books have nothing to do with the immortal soul. Nothing. In the Book of Wisdom, one gets 7 references to immortality and a beginning of Hellenistic or Greek influence on that particular volume. But the overwhelming judgment of both the Hebrew and the Christian scriptures is that there is no such thing as an immortal soul. Doesn't exist. No way. Doesn't exist. And this is 1999. Now, when a Jesuit writes an article like that, you would think that a lot of Jesuits would gather together and, hey, oh boy, this is an important issue. We need to actually go and look into this very carefully. If Morrow is correct, we have to change the catechisms. We have to change the way we present Jesus. We have to even change our notion of what happens to us when we die. Like I say, Catholics thought routinely that when they die, they do not die because their soul continues healthy and alive and either goes to heaven or to hell or to purgatory. That's what they thought. But guess what? If there is no soul, there's nothing to continue. Nothing to hold on to. The breathing stops. The way the breathing stopped for my father. The way the breathing stopped for my cat. When the breathing stops, life is not only discontinued. For me, for my father, and for my cats, it is the end. Oh boy, this is a hard pill to swallow. A very hard pill to swallow. And I'm going to challenge you, my hearers, to consider actually the evidence that I have brought forward. First of all, in 1955, the Cullmann lecture and book, the Jesuit article of 1999. Speaking personally, I used to believe that I had an immortal soul. I trusted actually the Baltimore Catechism, and I trusted actually my teachers. They all believed in the immortal soul, as far as I was aware. But my contact with Oscar Cullmann, and later with Morrow, Father Morrow, the Jesuit, showed me that this issue has never been fairly tested and tried. I have spent nearly 10 years looking into this question. At first I got fascinated with near-death experiences, but I gradually lost my interest in near-death experiences when I discovered that in India, guess what? Lord Krishna showed up in their near-death experiences. Lord Vishnu showed up. Jesus never showed up. So there was something culturally defined in near-death experiences. How about the issue of Alzheimer's disease? If the soul is so powerful that it actually retains the life and the experience of the individual, why cannot the soul overcome the onset of Alzheimer's disease? Well, how does it show up? The person who is being the victim loses a memory of some of the important events of their life. Their friends and their spouses have to remind them that these things even took place. They get lost when even walking around the block, they don't know how to get home again. They lose their ability to put their shoes on correctly, to dress themselves. As a matter of fact, at the end, they don't even remember the face of their spouses and of their own children. Those are the ravages of Alzheimer's disease. If the soul is immortal, if the soul can resist these changes and supply what is needed, this would never have happened. Therefore, I conclude that the Alzheimer's disease indicates with great clarity the medical necessity of completely cutting oneself off from any notion of a natural immortality. But even more than that, I don't like to be fooled. I don't like to be lied to. But guess what? My teachers fooled me and lied to me. They told me that this life is very short, maybe 80 years, 90 years max. But guess what? Your future life is going to extend 90 trillion years. Oh my gosh, take that in, 90 million years. How about 90 trillion years? You know, it makes this life look not important, small stuff. The big potatoes are coming in the future. The future, what's the future look like? Being in heaven, playing with the angels, having discussions, theological discussions with the angels and the saints. Wait a second here. What theological discussions go on in heaven? None. Because there is no immortal soul. This is where I have come. I actually wrote an essay, and I'm going to give you the address for this essay on why I do not believe in my immortal soul, just to see what personal aspects I bring to this question. My mother was perhaps the most loving and dear person in my whole life. She died when I was only 8. Do you not think that my uncles and aunts told me that I would someday see her in heaven? It was a lie. It was a lie. They thought it was right, but because they were influenced by the Socratic thinking. No. When I breathe my last breath, I'll be just like Jesus, just like my father, just like my cat. Once I have the last last breath, when I have my last breath, I will be no more. That's the end of the story. Very challenging. I have my answer. You have your answer. I'd like to hear what your answer is. Put it in the comments. Thank you very much. Okay, I am keenly aware that my message has caused great distress for some, and for others, they want to know more in order to actually begin to take action within their local church. I have prepared a study guide that actually takes the lesson that you just heard and actually details all of my sources and the complete logic and biblical tradition that I am following. This will provide you from the sources that you need. I have prepared a link at the bottom of this page, which will actually take you there and give you an opportunity not only to study this, but actually to enter into dialogue with other people who are concerned about this issue. Thank you very much. God bless you.